was about it. Our books, our books, our copy books and our study books. And
So she did infants through what age did she?
she had like the lower two grades, and then we had a female teacher, Mrs. Donahue, and she had the other grades. And then we had a master teacher, Master Sheehan, later on in years. And they had to come, well, Mrs. Donahue came from another direction, but in the later years, then Master Kelly had a car. So he was like, he'd come up from Rosscarbery in his car. But then Mrs. Minnis retired. She got very old and just couldn't teach anymore. So we had Mrs. Donahue. She was a little hard on us. But in the early years in Ireland, it's hard to think back on it, but the master was very tough on the boys, very tough to the point of, making them hold out their hand and slapping them on the hand for a very minor thing too. We talk about that now and we think how far away from that we are, and a good thing too. Yeah. But I don't know, it definitely made them do their homework and didn't want to show up at school without knowing everything that they had to know for the next day.
Yeah.
So, there's two sides to that.
Right, I suppose.
It's not anymore.
Now, when you were walking, and you walked, you didn't have bicycles or anything to get to school, what happens if the weather was bad?
If the weather was bad, we'd just have a little raincoat. We called it a sou'wester. It was a little raincoat with a hood. And then we only wore shoes in the winter. We went barefoot in the summer. We couldn't wait to go barefoot to school. Can we go without shoes today, Mom? No, not yet.
And was it, did you get soaking wet going to school, or were you fairly dry when you get there?
Yeah, you were fairly dry, and then you could stand around the fire. We had an open fireplace in the school, so you could stand around the fire and get dry again.
Sounds like it wasn't a bad experience.
No, it wasn't. Not at all. Yeah. No, it was the going thing, and everybody was the same.
And what time did you go to school? What were the hours?
8 in the morning. We had to be there at 8, and then we got home. We actually got out of school around 3, and it probably took us nearly an hour. We used to dawdle on the way home and check out the frog ponds and check this out and that out. And sometimes we'd pick a very nice small turnip and a little slated stone, and we'd peel it and we'd eat that on the way home, and so on. We'd walk home with other neighbors,
Yeah.
And we might not take the same direction every day. There was a few ways we could come, but it was always across the fields.
Yeah. Sounds nice. It really does.
Yeah.
It sounds very picture.
It was we had a great upbringing. We really had a great upbringing,
And did you go? What time of the year would you be through with school for the summer?
Summer holidays. I don't really remember, but I know we were out of school, and we didn't get a lot of holidays. We weren't out for a long time, but I don't know how long we were out or what time it was. In the summer, sometime,
I suppose summertime was probably the busiest time with the harvesting and everything.
Yeah.
So you really need to be out.
We were.
The house was built of stone. Or was
Yes.
It, yeah. Okay.
Yes.
And with a slate roof.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And you eventually got electricity? Did they have electricity before you left Ireland?
They did.
They did.
Yeah.
When did electricity come in?
That's a good question. 34, probably in the 50s. Probably in the 50s or 60s, maybe close to 60. Yeah.
That do you recall it when you first had electricity? I mean, was
it
it
because we got a radio. We got a real electric radio then, or wireless as we called it. And prior to that, we had something from an antenna that they got some news by. But most of their news they always got through reading the newspaper, and then all the farmers would get together at each other's homes. They'd most of them used to smoke the pipe, and they'd have a bottle of Guinness, and they'd talk about all the current events in the markets and whatever was going on, and that was their education, and they had a newspaper. We had a newspaper always. It was the Southern Star, it was called, and they read the Southern Star every week religiously.
Mm-hmm.
And then they would get together and talk, and we'd visit with the ladies in the parish and so on. And that's how it was.
It
Yeah,
always amazes me, the mind of the Irish people, because they have so many facts in it.
yeah,
They've preserved their history, of course, from ancient times that way, rather than in written words often.
that's right.
And the memories are phenomenal.
Yeah.
Of the people and the things
Yeah.
they recall.
Yeah.
What would you say was the favorite thing that your mother would cook that you enjoyed the most when you think back?
Probably the raisin bread when we were young. She made big cakes of raisin bread, like probably the bake dish was probably about 18 inches, and she hung it over the open fire, and she'd have fire under it, and then she'd have fire over. She'd pick up the coals and put them over on the lid, and it was cast iron, and those cakes came out so beautiful. And then we had they made beautiful sweet cakes, and of course at Christmas time they made plum puddings and all kinds of extra things,
All
So
over the fire.
yeah,
How would you cook something like? What would you have for a Christmas dinner?
we'd have turkey or goose, one or the other. We'd have turkey for Christmas and goose for New Year's, or vice versa, but turkey mostly.
And how would
And
that
ham.
be cooked?
We had a lot of ham,
How would
home cured ham,
Okay. And how would the turkey or the geese be cooked?
in
out
a
of the pot?
bigger pot in the same way, over the fire with the coals on top.
On top.
Yeah,
Also. So
on
it was
top also.
roasted.
Yes, it was roasted.
Wow.
Yeah, it was
Okay.
roasted and
so there wasn't
delicious.
spit or anything.
No,
Wow.
no, that's how they did all the cooking.
In the
No.
big pots.
Yeah. And we
Amazing.
had, for 10 of us, we had big pots of potatoes. Well, I don't know if all 10 of us were ever there. My brother had probably gone away by the time Mickey was born. So anyway.
And so now, if you in the morning when you get up, you were going to go off to school. Just tell me, like a day when, say, you were 12 years old. What would a day have been like for you when you were about 12?
12. I was just ready then to finish. Well, actually, when I was 12, I was very ill, so I won't go into
All
that.
right, we'll
I
go
had
to
a
a different age.
perforated appendix, and anyway, I was out of school for a while, so I was a little bit older when I finished. You'd get up in the morning, you'd do your chores, whatever you had to do. You'd have your breakfast, usually
What would you have for breakfast?
brown bread and tea, or maybe cocoa, but that was it. Brown bread, homemade brown wheat bread, and tea. And then, get ready, take your satchel on your back, and off to school. The neighbors would be coming by at that time too, see, and they would come up our boreen, and then we'd all head up that way.
Now you're
all
saying
together.
boreen, and I know what that means, but tell us what
A boreen is a small road only traveled by foot or by horse and car, not very wide.
And paved.
No pavement.
No paved.
No pavement, just gravel and stones. Yeah.
And then after school you would come home. Then what would happen?
After school we'd come home, then we'd have to do our homework right away the minute we came home, and then we'd do whatever our mother wanted us to do. At 12 I was probably sewing with the sewing machine, and whatever she needed you to do, to take the hens in or put the hens out or put the hens in or count the hens or bring in the eggs, whatever, whatever.
And then in the evening?
And then in the evening time, we just, had dinner, and we'd all sit around and talk. And then later on, maybe like about 7:30, we'd have the rosary, and then after that, it would be bedtime,
And did everybody in the family do the rosary every night?
Everybody, yeah. And my brothers would be watching, and say, oh, how many more prayers is Dad going to say? Because he not only said the rosary, he had so many prayers after the rosary, and they would be getting a little restless.
And where would the rosary take place?
In the kitchen.
In the kitchen.
Yeah, in the kitchen. Yeah.
And those were happy memories too.
They were great memories.
And did you ever have the Stations of the Cross? That you
We
had?
did. Yeah, we did.
What
In
was
our
that?
turn. In our turn we had it. Yeah. It was great preparations for the station. Whitewashing the walls outside, and oh my goodness, getting the house ready, and planning the meal, and then all the other ladies from close by would come and help with the cooking, and serving the priest was a big thing, but mostly he would have a boiled egg, but he was very fussy about his egg was done. And waiting on the priest was like, oh my goodness, you had to be somebody special to wait on the priest. And and then he collected the offering. Everybody gave their offering at the station. And then after the priest left, there was no drink or anything, until he left. Nothing.
Until he left.
And, yeah, until he left. And then after he left, they'd have a party all day. They'd have a big party the day of the station. But for weeks before, they'd be like painting and whitewashing and getting everything in shape,
Curtains come down.
Curtains come down, washed up, everything.
And how often would a family have a station?
That I don't remember. It depended, I think, on the number of houses in the town land. And I don't really remember how often we had it. But it was a great day. It was a great day.
I bet. And was there music and dancing?
Music and dancing, yeah, and a great time. Great time.
Did the neighbors bring food, or was it the person having
it? It was the person having it that had all the food.
Everything?
Yeah, there was nothing brought to the house by anybody.
So that was a big celebration.
It was a big celebration.
And did you know far in advance that you were going to have the station, so you could kind of save the money and get it organized?
Yeah, we did. We knew when our turn was coming. Yeah, and they used to have to go for. They had a special box that went from house to house that had the chalice and everything that the priest needed for the station, probably his vestments and everything. So that they would do the day before. One of my brothers would go for the box for the station, and then they had everything in that, So, that's how it was. Yeah. But the priest was always, served first in the parlor, and, and certain people would be chosen to sit with the priest, and so on.
And how were they chosen? Was it family members that were chosen, or?
Like my dad would be there, and then probably one of my uncles, and then a neighbor or someone like that, Mostly men with the priest.
And who made the choice of who was going to be there?
I guess our parents. Yeah. I guess our parents did,
Yeah, it must have been quite an honor then. If
Yeah.
you were one of the
Yes, it.
people.
Yeah. It was.
And who would serve the priest? Would it be one of the men, or would?
It would be either my mom or one of the other ladies that did it, would go around, and she was sort of designated to do that. She ended up being my sister-in-law, Winnie. God rest her soul. She passed away since that. And so, it was a great time. But everybody let their hair down once the priest left. So that was it,
Time to have a good time.
Yeah,
then.
time to have a good time. Yeah.
Did your family have any cures? Like if somebody wasn't feeling well, did your mother have something that she would?
Yeah, they did, They did. They had, they had a lot of cures. They had a tincture of, they called it Sloan's liniment, and they used to rub it into their joints. And it had to do some good, I think, too, And then they had their own remedies as well. Like I remember my dad. Now, he used to save the goose grease when they would kill the goose for the table, And he would save the sort of the goose fat. And he'd save it in a jar. And then at night he would take out a portion of it by the fire. With the heat, it sort of melted into an oil, and I can still see him rubbing his knees with that at night, So rub that, into his knees.
And it was just the fat?
Yeah, just the fat from the goose. But I guess it had, fermented a little bit in the jar or something to it. You don't think about those things until you get older.
Yeah.
And then you think, oh my goodness.
Wonder what it was.
Yeah.
How about cod liver oil?
Cod liver oil we got, every day. Liquid. Open your mouth, spoon. Spoon of cod liver oil.
Yeah. And if somebody had did you have people that got ill? What kind of things would you?
Yeah, like a cold, we'd
Yeah.
have a hot drink, hot lemon drink or something like that. Heat up some lemonade or something like that. But we had no Tylenol or anything like that. But they had Aspros, they were. So when we were young, we might get a half an Aspro if we had a fever. That was it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And did doctors come out then in those days to
if you were very ill, the doctor would come. But you had to go for him. First of all, you had to go down 4 miles to Rosscarbery to get him, and then he would come up. But he had a car. He was the only one that had a car. Like my brother would go down on the bicycle to get him, and then he would come up if somebody was very ill. Otherwise, they were taken to see the doctor.
Yeah.
That's how it was.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
see. Okay.
Yeah.
And you were talking about now the things you did for fun, like playing not school, but playing store.
Yes.
I remember doing that
Shop.
when I was a kid too.
Did you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you remember any kind of rhymes or anything that you had that, maybe jumping rope or anything like that?
Oh, we had jump rope, and I'm sure we did have a lot of other things that we did also, Yeah, we did. We
How about
played
marbles?
when we had time.
Did you play marbles?
No, we had no marbles. No, we had no marbles. We had storybooks. We read quite a bit. We had storybooks. And
what was Christmas like, Mary?
oh, Christmas was wonderful.
That it was.
Christmas was wonderful. Yeah. Christmas was marvelous. We had foods and drinks and things that we didn't have all year. Christmas was special. It was a big festive time. And my mom would be cooking and of course we would help where we could, cooking a long time before, making plum puddings and very rich kern cakes and everything, planning the Christmas feasts and the New Year's feasts and the whole thing. That was a wonderful time. It was the only time at Christmas that we went to church in the dark. And so, my dad would be out testing the road to be sure that there wasn't frost on the road, or that he needed to put frost nails in the horses' hoofs, in their shoes. He had to put a certain type of nail.
Oh.
Yeah, he had to put a certain type of nail so they would get a grip with it, because otherwise the nail came level with the shoe,
Right.
so they would slip.
Slide.
Yeah. So he had to put probably 1 or 2 in each shoe.
That's very.
To keep-
I've never heard of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that so well.
And that
Yeah.
would be put on at the time that you were going to make the journey?
Yeah.
And then taken out again when you got back? Or?
Probably. That I don't remember.
Wow.
But I remember him testing the road for the frost in the morning.
Yeah.
And then we went in the dark time, because there were 2 masses on Christmas Day. Excuse me, 2 masses. So we'd go to the first mass. And it was a beautiful time. The church and the choir, the echo in the church, they had no microphones or anything, but there was a beautiful echo of the choir, in the darkness in the church and so on. It was a special time.
What time of the day would it be when you say early, the early mass?
Early, we would probably leave the house at 7, but it was still dark at 7
Yes.
in the morning. And probably the mass was at 8.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about, I know that in the summertime it stays light out a long time, but in the wintertime, what time would it be getting dark?
In the wintertime, it probably was full dark by 9 o'clock.
At night?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in the morning it wouldn't get light out until...
Wouldn't get light until later too, because the sky was always so overcast, But I remember when my dad worked in the flax mill, he had a bicycle, and he had to cycle like 3 miles or so, 3.5 miles to the flax mill. And then when he'd be coming home, if it was raining or a bad night, we'd all be at the window watching for his bicycle light to come. And then when he'd open the hall door, we'd open the door inside, and we'd say, "Welcome home, Dad." Yeah. Welcome home, Dad.
Now, on Christmas when you were having your meal, would it be just your immediate family, or would your grandparents?
It would be our immediate family. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what it would be.
Yeah. And were there Christmas stockings or Christmas trees or anything like that?
There were like our just our stocking, our knee socks we wore, and we would hang that up. But we would get like an orange and an apple or something like that. There were no toys until later on. We might get a tiny little rag doll later on, and that was like a big treat as we got older. Yeah. But it was all family and family and fun within the family, and foods, and we would have like a drink that we didn't have all year. There was a special cordial that they mixed with water, and we used to call it raspberry wine. but it was just a cordial, you know. And they'd mix it with the water, and then it was red in color or pink or whatever, and we thought that was great.
And so your Christmas morning, would it, aside from the fact that you went to church very early in the morning, would you still have the normal chores that had to be done every
Yeah,
day?
there was always chores. Yeah, always chores to be done.
So what made it most special was the foods or the anticipation or what?
The anticipation of Christmas and the religious part of it, and you know, was Santa Claus going to come, or this, that, or the other, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you had your stocking that you hung up, your knee sock.
Yeah.
And did you have a tree, or how did the house get decorated?
No, we had actually what we had holly and ivy, red berry holly and ivy, and lots of it, and we put it over every picture and every doorway and that. But we didn't have a tree, but we had red berry holly and ivy everywhere, over the pictures, over the trees,
And
over
that
the
came right
doors.
from outside the house.
Yeah, from outside. Yeah, you'd go to the glen to get it. You know, it grew in abundance too. Beautiful red berry holly. Yeah.
And how about, I've heard people talk about candles in the windows.
Yes.
Did you have that custom
Yes.
too?
Yes.
What was that about?
That was Christmas.